I mean, I've got a funny story about that actually with meditation today. Yeah. I mean, probably not the thing that we want to talk about. Okay, so I need to invite Craig, but he needs to jump on board. Okay, that's right. So I need to wait till he is on here. Hey, everybody, although no one is here yet, but here we go. Welcome aboard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am waiting for my friend Coach Craig to jump on here any second now. And Coach Craig and I are going to answer your questions. Anything about addiction, anything addiction related, but also any mental health question. I am here, licensed marriage and family therapist, do a lot of couples work, do a lot with anxiety, depression, emotional immaturity, also known as narcissism, narcissistic traits and tendencies. And I have Sid, if you're used to watching the lives, Sydney is right. I can see her here, so we will hear from you. Right, Sid?
Back in my corner.
Back in your corner. That's right. Oh, somebody last time made the funny joke. Do you know that comment, nobody puts baby in the corner? Do you know what that's from? It's an old movie reference. Okay, here we go. Here's Craig coming on.
I'm here to kick anyone off if they're being
That's right. That's right. Okay, okay, here we go. Oh, look at that. Right out of the gate.
Has questions.
Okay, so if you have questions, please get them in. Put them in the chat, and then we will. Sydney is going to. She's maintaining the Q&As. Craig and I are here to answer everything. Craig, are you ready to solve all of life's troubles?
Nobody puts baby in a corner. I'm ready.
I should do that, right? Hold on, Craig. You know what? You look very passionate right now, though, as I'm not hearing you. So let me do this. Okay.
Oh, now I lost your audio.
There it is.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. You can hear me?
Okay. All right. I can
Wonderful.
You can hear me?
When I first came on, Tony, I said, nobody puts baby in a corner. So I'm ready. Let's go.
What is the reference though? What is that from? That is from
the dancing movie with Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Gardner. And the name of the movie is, put it in the chat. Someone save us here. Who did it?
Okay. I know now, but I think that somebody will know this.
Nobody puts baby in a corner. This is your first quiz, listeners. What is the name of that movie?
Okay. Somebody must know. I do know now though, Craig. I do. Okay, we have some questions coming in, so please get your questions in. But currently, and does anybody know where they comment? Nobody puts.
Just Jacob Guy says, my wife, every time I tell her she's not treating me well or is being rude, she turns it back on me. Nobody put baby in a corner. It's not Flashdance.
Oh, that's what I thought it was.
Nope, it's another movie involving rhythmic flow of body. Another word for that is
Insane Angel. Dirty Fan is in the name of the movie. Okay, now
Dirty. Yes, it is. Dirty is the first word.
Yes. Okay. All right. Somebody put baby in a corner.
Yeah. Someone put baby in the corner. The movie is Dirty Dancing.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Craig.
There we go. You're welcome.
I worry about though when you were the person that commented earlier was with asking a question, and then we're thinking that was about the movie, saying that every time that their wife says or they say something, their wife turns it around on them. So I wonder if that was a question that is here for me to answer. Actually, so whoever said that, Sid, do you want to find out where that question came from?
Yeah, that was just Jacob Guy.
Just say, okay, so we can start with that one. So what was that? Let's pretend it was a real question. What was that question, Sid?
Oh,
yeah.
My wife, every time I tell her she's not treating me well or being rude, she turns it back.
Okay, so my wife, every time she turns it back around to him. So, I mean, I think at that point, though, we are talking about a little bit of gaslighting. And I've been working on a new episode of that recently. And because there's some different types of gaslighting. I think gaslighting is, Craig, how familiar are you with the concept or the term?
Well, first of all, I was that's incredibly manipulative, narcissist gaslighter at one point in my life when I was in my addiction days. So I'm intimately familiar with being a gaslighter and working with addicts over the past 12 years, intimately familiar with the term.
Yeah. Okay. So talk about that when you're working with an addict and you recognize that that's what they're doing. How hard is that to get somebody to recognize that is versus them that is just how they react. That is how they live.
Well, it can be a form of abuse. Mm-hmm. And I think it is very hard. The closer the person approaches narcissistic personality disorder, the harder it is to expose that kind of behavior. Now, none of my clients have narcissistic personality disorder. They all possess narcissistic traits.
Yeah.
And so since they come to me at low points in their lives, they're often very receptive to that reframing and realize that they're gaslighting. Now, listen, it's a bad word. The people who are gaslit suffer tremendously. It is also a defense mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And helping them understand that is, pretty easy. Once you shine a light on it, most people are willing to accept the fact that they are defending themselves. They're manipulating reality to keep their lies secret, to make them feel better about themselves.
Let's talk about that. So first of all, After the Rain, I like this. A good piece of business there. Have you ever seen the sequel, Clean Dancing? I've not. I see where you're going. But then the question though, what's the difference between gaslighting and then being passive aggressive? And that's a great question, because I think so much of it starts from a place of, what do we do to alleviate our discomfort? What do we do? How do we show up in a way to try to get rid of the discomfort or the negative feelings that we're having? A lot of times there's a point where you are diffusing your anxiety or your anger into the relationship. And you're basically saying, I don't like the way that I feel, so I'm going to put it back on you. Now, what are you going to do with it? And that's, go ahead, Greg.
Well, they're both forms of manipulation. Yeah. They're both protective strategies. You know me, Tony, I like to think of things from the parts perspective. So the passive aggressive part feels and learns through often childhood training that that's the only way to get their needs met, by being passive aggressive. The person is likely a poor communicator, isn't really sure about their needs. And so they use these techniques that they learned often in childhood from parents to get their needs met, but it's done in a way just like gaslighting, of course, which produces terrible outcomes.
Yeah, I appreciate the parts work, because you talk about there are no bad parts. So at some point when somebody's being passive aggressive, or if there's gaslighting, it's a childhood defense mechanism, or it's something that they have felt like they need to do in order to be heard or to be understood. I mean, it's an immature way, but it is a way. So maybe talk more about the no bad parts. What would the gaslighting or what would the passive aggressive behavior be doing that would benefit that person?
Well, the 3 questions from the internal family systems model, which I absolutely love, are these 3 questions. What job is the part doing? What does that part fear would happen if it stopped doing that job? And then the last question is what that part needs. The main difference between gaslighting and passive aggressive is gaslighting is direct. It involves deliberate deception, while passive aggressive is indirect and is designed to avoid direct confrontation. Both of them can have the same impact, but what need is the part meeting? So the gaslighter is often trying to protect ego, protect lies. So for example, if the person's an addict and they're lying about acting out. So let's say guys with watching videos, what kind, on the internet, since we can't say that word. And the wife opens up their phone, looks at their history and says, what have you been doing? And the guy says, I haven't been doing anything. You're crazy. I don't know where that came from. These days what happened with technology. I didn't do that. Even though there's a repeated pattern in his search pattern, that's gaslighting. You are denying someone reality. And while both can have serious impacts, when I put them on the spectrum of harm, it feels to me like gaslighting is at the top of the harm caused, versus the passive aggressive, indirect, unsure, avoiding direct confrontation.
Well, and here's what I think is so difficult about when I work with somebody that is I call them the pathologically kind. So they often find themselves in the relationship with the extremely emotionally immature. So they are someone that typically gives somebody else that benefit of the doubt, and they don't question that other person, they question themselves. So then they're continually trying to say, okay, this made sense to me. So, but now it doesn't make sense to, we'll just say him now. And so I better go figure it out. What am I missing? Am I the one that said something wrong? Am I misrepresenting what I'm seeing? And so then they question their own reality or their own sanity. And all that person did this gaslighting is they just alleviated that discomfort. So they feel good. A lot of times after that, they've said, I didn't do it. I can't even believe you accused me of doing that. As a matter of fact, I think you owe me an apology. Now the nice person is going in saying, okay, maybe I did misunderstand this, or maybe I did see it the wrong way. And so now what are they going to do? They're going to come to as therapists, I get those people coming in saying, hey, am I going crazy? Or every time I think I see something and I bring that up to my partner, I leave there feeling worse. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, I just shouldn't say anything. But that person, the addict or the person that was doing the gaslighting, their anxiety is alleviated. They feel better. So they're good. And they are not continually worrying about it, thinking about it. So it works. It's quite frankly, which I hate to say.
A very effective strategy, because when you look at the job of the gaslighter, and I just pulled up a client's assignment, and obviously I'm going to speak generally. What does the gaslighter do? The gaslighter protects the vulnerable part. The gaslighter maintains control and safety. The gaslighter protects against guilt and shame. The gaslighter is rooted in a fear of intimacy and vulnerability, an incredible fear of being rejected, with results being abandoned. And the gaslighter protects in a dominant or authorian part that need that control in order to function. If they don't have the control, the person will see them for who they are, a lying, manipulative, deceiving addict in my cases, which is what the gaslighter protects, that behavior, that ego. But nonetheless, very, very damaging, obviously.
Yeah. Are you familiar with CPTSD, Craig? Do you talk about that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm less, I'm aware of the different diagnoses. So I'm a coach, so I often point clients in the right direction. So it's important for me to understand my lane. But I've been diagnosed with PTSD, a back and forth conversation of whether or not it formally qualified for CPTSD. So I'm familiar personally, and a number of my clients, the worse the addiction, the worse the mental health issues, the bigger the ability to compartmentalize, the greater the chance of the addict having a complex PTSD-like condition.
Okay. And I was even speaking to the person that's in the relationship with the addict as well, because at that point, when you're questioning your own reality, there's a belief that like you've got this heightened fight or flight response. And the more that you have that heightened fight or flight response, that less blood flow is going to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, where you're in your logical part of the brain. And so the first thing to go is your short-term memory. It's kind of said, okay, we're not needed here. Things will go into short-term memory. They don't make it into long-term memory. And basically, the more that you're just in the constant state of, okay, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. I don't know if I'm going to get this right. I'm worried that this person's going to turn around and tell me that isn't what I did or said. Now, all of a sudden, that person's constantly on the state of anxiety when they're trying to approach a conversation. So that whole dynamic, the relationship between the addict and then their partner. I mean, now we start talking about the enmeshment or a little bit of codependent behavior. What do you do with the concept of codependency? Because I think that's changed a lot, even over the years since I started 20 years ago. Yeah.
Some people embrace that terminology and it really resonates with them. As some partners, for example, of someone struggling with the words we can't say on here, addiction, sometimes receive that as being blamed or being called the co-addict or the codependent, as if they did something wrong. Its principles are sound, and it helps people understand. Listen, first of all, we're all codependent. We're social creatures. We know that as a matter of course. It all exists on a spectrum. So when someone is codependent, clinically, for example, they are enmeshed. They lack an individual identity. Their reality is framed by whether or not that person loves them, whether or not that person is telling them the truth. And if you're in a relationship with an addict, developing an awareness on how your phrase, which I love, emotional immaturity is impacting you, that's the path. That's where they go to grow and to heal and say, whatever's going on over here, I'm going to learn to take on what's mine and leave what isn't, And that's part of their healing journey, breaking free from that codependency so they can make the best decisions what are right for them.
I appreciate that too, Craig. And let me say 54 Hustler, where you're saying we're not all codependent. And let me just make a little bit of a case. And this isn't trying to convince one that they are codependent. But when we get in relationships, and I mean, unless somebody grew up in a completely differentiated home where they could hold on to their own sense of autonomy, they had a secure attachment with a parent, they were allowed to just do and be everything that they wanted to. And they always had this person behind them saying, I got your back, champ, which I hope so. I think that will be something that eventually we'll get to. But people go into relationships and they are codependent and enmeshed is what I like to say. So we come into relationships and hardly anybody has the right tools from the factory because we're trying to show up and say, okay, I got to show this person the best part of me or else they're going to leave. I'm not open enough about my deepest desires and my most vulnerabilities. So we're starting to talk about the things that we feel are easy to talk about. So if somebody says, hey, do you like scary movies? And if I really don't, but I like that person, then all of a sudden I'm going to think, you know what? I mean, this is where I think that our own immaturity kicks in. There are some scary movies I like, but I like this person. So I bet I could grow to like scary movies. So my answer, yeah, I do. So all of a sudden then I'm going to say whatever I need to say to get this person to stay engaged with me. And then if they think something that I really don't appreciate, I might say, you know what, I won't bring that up now. Or so we're doing this little dance of just, I don't want this person to think I'm crazy. I don't want this person to leave me. So that is a form of enmeshment and codependency. So it's not the type of codependency where we said in the past where somebody's going to go buy somebody their bottled alcohol, even though they know that this person's struggling with alcohol abuse. But that codependency and enmeshment really is just, we aren't being our truest selves. We are willing to say the things that are in our deepest heart's desires because we're afraid this person might leave. So that's what differentiation is about. So I say we get into relationships, codependent and enmeshed. That's like right here. And then we start going through life and we start having different experiences. And so we start to experience or express, this is how I really believe or feel. This person says, really? I had no idea you thought that. You never told me that. A lot of times we kind of go, you know what, actually, let me rethink that. And we go back into this enmeshment because we're eventually trying to become differentiated, which is where one person ends and the other begins. So if you feel like you can truly hold on to your sense of self, and if that person's telling you that they think that you're wrong and you're able to just sit there, quiet mind, calm heart, differentiated, you manage your reactions, you don't go too big, you don't play small. I mean, and that takes a lot of work to do. Now we can do it through a relationship, but that's a long-winded way for me to say that really is okay. He says, yeah, I don't do that dance. I don't like chaos. Then that's amazing. I mean, that is that strong presence. And I think that will continually probably be tested for safety by people in relationships with you. But if you're able to hold on to that strong sense of self, I mean, that's really what we're trying to get out of relationships. We want a connection with somebody, but we also want to hold on to ourselves or learn more about how we show up in different situations. So I know, Craig, if you have thoughts around that too, or when you talk about that codependency or enmeshment.
Well, it exists on a spectrum because on the same time in a relationship, you could be too independent and not take the other person's needs into consideration. And to put that on an extreme, a narcissist, the inability to value someone else's feelings, a profound lack of empathy. So when I say we're all codependent, it's not in the clinical sense. It's recognizing that as social creatures, we bond, and that bonding is very, very complex. We bring with us to that bond the training that we received in childhood. And for many of us, that training was broken in many different ways. We're trained to hide. We're trained to stuff our feelings down, and which only breeds resentment. So I think relationships are probably, more complicated than quantum computing.
Well, it's funny you say that. I was watching this video by a psychologist. I cannot remember who it was, or I would give him credit right now. But he was talking about how engaged do you stay when somebody is telling you a story that you don't necessarily find interesting? Because that is one of those concepts it's a little bit more emotionally mature. I mean, there's one side that will say, I'm being differentiated. This isn't for me. So that's not, I will now hold a boundary. And if I am bored, then I will leave. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the way to build a connection. Because now I'm saying I only will interact with people that I find interesting or that I find funny. So it goes back to that. What do we do with our discomfort? And sometimes that discomfort is I care about this person, I don't necessarily care as much about what they're saying. So there's my opportunity for growth. So I got to be aware of that. I got to stay present, lean in. I got to be more curious. There's where that word comes in. I love the concepts of being curious, because you start being curious about somebody, not telling them how they feel or what they think, and it will start to get really uncomfortable when you are saying, tell me more about that. And what's that like? Watch yourself just start to say, okay, but why would you want that? Or why would you do that? Or, but that isn't what and so I like what you're saying. I mean, we're not trying to say be a pushover and just say, okay, whatever this person thinks, but we're also saying, but it isn't just a me thing. Not everything is not about me. And I think there is where that spectrum lies of how do I hold on to my sense of self, but maintain a connection with another without that connection just being control. You have love or control in an adult relationship, not both. And I think that a lot of times people mistake that, no, I'm going to control, but it's like for their good. Well, let's see if that's good for them. Let's ask them that question.
Well, I love the word curious. It is so in the internal family systems model, there is a center. And if anybody has seen the Pixar movie Inside Out, that movie reflects the internal family systems model and the mindful habit system, which is my program, which reflects the reality that we have these different parts. In the internal family systems model, at the center, they have what's called the self. So my religious brothers and sisters would call that the Holy Spirit. My secular brothers and sisters would call that their center, their Jiminy Cricket. And that part is curious. That center wants to know more, is again, you may not be interested in the subject matter of what your partner is talking about, but you're happy they're happy. You want to understand why they're happy. You're looking for threads that you can pull on to support that person, to share your interest and be grateful that your partner is enjoying something without, doesn't interest me. Stop talking.
Yeah. And that's where I think, I don't know if it was you, they would say, Angie, Ain said all those who were supposed to protect me didn't, and I won out. And that's one of those things where a lot of times we develop this anxiety and think we're doing things wrong when we're just going about our own life. And it's because when really boil it down to a lot of times when you're little and you're just being a kid and you're told you're doing it wrong. We don't say that. We don't talk that way. Calm down. And when a kid's just existing, they're just being a kid. And so at that point, we stop externalizing our emotions. Then we internalize them. Now we need somebody else to tell me I'm okay. Or I need somebody else to tell me that what I said was right. Versus, and that's where I go back to that, where I'm saying that secure attachment, I don't think we really even understand what that looks like now. I'm a parent, a therapist for 20 years, 4 kids. They're all adults now. And I think maybe I did it a little bit because a parent continues to want to give this advice, thinking that that's what I need to do. I need to teach my kid right from wrong, which there's no argument that would be helpful. But in essence, then I think oftentimes the parent in any interaction with the kid is, now I got to do it right now. That's wrong. Don't do that. Or let me tell you how I used to do these things. But meanwhile, the kid is not, they're not being heard or understood. So they're being taught that their place is to be told that when they are okay, or to, in essence, not be able to speak up for themselves. And so that's the part where, Ange and Dennis saying, same, sad too. So this is where what Craig's talking about, this internal family systems, is an incredible way to heal. Craig, somebody earlier asked what your credentials are, your background. So you can talk about that, and then maybe talk about how do you heal, whether it's from addiction or whether it's from this childhood trauma or wounding, and from your experience.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a loaded question. The easy question is my background. I'm an attorney. I'm an executive, and I got fired 14 years ago after decades of therapy and meetings and treatment. I OD'd. I OD'd on the synthetic chemical bath salts. I ended up in a 3-day hold, Tony, not too far from here, Heritage Oaks, facility I know you're familiar with. And my therapist, who I saw after that low point, felt that I had a gift and hired me. So I became a certified professional coach. I had this crazy idea to build this model, this training, this psychoeducation, which had structure versus a lot of my therapy with lack structure. And for the past 12 years, I've been helping people all over the world, now in 30 countries, 1,000 clients. I've been on the Steve Harvey show, the Katie Couric show. I was most recently on A&E's show, Digital Addiction, which is the digital version of their show, Intervention. And after people are done with therapy and they need coaching, they come to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So then talk about that healing process. That you're trained in internal family systems as well, which therapists like myself we're on wait lists to get trained. I mean, that's exploded.
Oh, I made it into level 2.
You did. Okay.
I made it into level 2. I just applied. So I've been trained in level 1 IFS, and 3 years it took me to get into level 2. I still have to apply, and there's a bias against coaches, but because I'm level 1 trained, hopefully I'll get it. So what shook me about parts work and the internal family systems when I learned that the addict part is actually trying to help.
Mhm.
I said, wait a minute, that part of me is disease, that part of me is disgusting, that part of me is literally the worst aspect of myself. But if you embrace the principles supported by neuroscience of the internal family systems model, virtually all behavior is need-seeking behavior. So if everyone here make a list of all their bad habits and addictions, we can go through that list, not saying we're going to do it, but we could, and identify the needs that those behaviors are meeting. Self-judgment and criticism is meeting a need. The addict seeks to numb, cope, and escape. The hider seeks to protect from being rejected and being abandoned. The angry part is how you are seen and how you can communicate and make sure that your rights don't get stomped on and that you don't get taken advantage of. So it shifts this notion from there being bad habits and you having these bad parts. And what neuroscience says is none of those things are true. There are no bad habits. There are no bad parts. And that perspective completely shifts the script on that internal dialogue that you have. So let's say, gosh, I made a mistake. I just stumbled over my words. I feel like an idiot. And I have this first thought, you stupid piece of what, right? That's the first thought that pops into my head. Instead of, I'm so bad. You're right. I am that. And how could I have that thought after all this work that I've done? And I'm supposed to be a leader and I run this company and, we work together and the rest of the team. No, what I ask is, what is your intention? Why did you say that? What are you trying to get at? Well, I'm trying to make sure you don't make mistakes, right? I'm trying to make sure that you do it perfect. I'm trying to make sure that everybody likes you. Okay. Well, that's a little rough way of doing it. So what that model does, it allows you to bring compassion to that part because I know why that expression pops into my head faster than clock time, despite 3+ decades of therapy and counseling and mindfulness and all the, wonderful things I've done, because that's how I was trained.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that as a child when my mother was upset and she, lashed out and lost control. As a small child, that's the phrase that she used.
Yeah.
So I know where it came from. Understanding where it came from, why the people listening has this bad habit, why, you have these quote unquote bad parts, understanding their origin story, which becomes the container for all that family of origin work, root cause work that people do with their therapists. It gives them a place to put it and understand why that part is doing that job the way it's doing it. And that changes the internal dialogue. It minimizes negative thinking. And it gives you a framework to do something about it and to actually meet that need proactively instead of reactively. Maybe I need to prepare better. Maybe I need to get my answers, written down and make an outline before I do this presentation. I'll say, hey, piece of crap part, what might we do differently?
Yeah.
How can I be better at what I do? Versus, here we go again. I'm worthless. I'm such a screw up. I can't believe I embarrassed myself on this live. I'm a piece of what.
Yeah. Because then you'll look for, you'll look for any kind of thing to validate that part. I mean, that part's going to look for all the, that's where those cognitive distortions come in, or where all of a sudden, well, okay, everything went great, but you did say this one thing. So now I'm going to just hang on to that. I'm not going to be able to accept the compliment. I'm not going to be able to take that in at all. And I'm just going to go right back to that. Yeah, but I messed up. And you mentioned perfectionism there a little bit earlier. How often do you think that is one of the biggest things that people struggle with without knowing it? That perfectionism.
I think it's huge.
Yeah.
I now have come to the conclusion, and since you know me as well personally as you do, I am perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
I am perfectly imperfect. There's no such thing except being perfectly imperfect. And so many of us had to be perfect as children. Any mistake meant we were going to be a failure. We were going to be a loser. We were going to get in trouble, and we'd end up in a van down by the river.
That's right.
So we had to be perfect. And of course, there's absolutely no such thing.
No. And think about that too. I mean, that's when I first started learning about internal family systems. Was I had a client that their parent had told them how stupid they were often. I mean, we're talking often. And so they're coming into therapy assuming that that's a pretty normal thing, and they're saying, and sometimes people even, they're kind of saying, okay, right. I call it the right guys. They're saying, everybody's parent gets on them when they're little, just continually tells them how stupid they are. And then part of that is like, no, that isn't okay. That wasn't okay for that parent to do. I mean, that's not a good response. And so then what did this client do? Now they are going to be perfect, because if they can be perfect, they will never be called stupid again. But that perfect to the point of where it just caused a tremendous amount of anxiety. Look at that. Yeah. Brene Brown, perfectionism is a worthless crutch. And it really is. And I think what's interesting though, is now we get into the, how do you get your whole sense of self from external validation? So one of the big challenges there is that what do we reward more than not? Is the person that gets the good grades, the person that is the star athlete, the person who is kind of out there front and center doing all the things. But little do we know that person is often pretty miserable because it's never enough, because they never feel like they are enough. And then they typically often are still in situations where you get a 94, and I don't know if anybody has had this experience where they're young, but then the parent's like, okay, what can you do better? And to where instead of saying that's amazing. And so it's just never enough. And I think when somebody starts to feel like they are never enough, now what do they need to do? Here comes that siren song of a coping mechanism that's saying, hey, how can we calm you down? How can we make you feel better? So what is, maybe you can talk about that with the, what do they call them? There's the exile. There's the,
first a little story of all of my memories. I am a 53-year-old man. I still remember in elementary school, 3rd or 4th grade, perfect report card, perfect report card, perfect report card. Eventually, I'm a left-hander and the handwriting went south.
Mm-hmm.
I get a B in handwriting. I remember that day like it was yesterday, because I remember the disappointment. And listen, of course, I'm a little kid. I've internalized it. My parents set very high standards for me. I wouldn't have it anyway, in one sense, because it drove me to accomplish some really great things in my life. So there's benefits to that. But at the same time, looking back as a 53-year-old, I remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's the conditioning. That's the training. Not good enough. More focus on negative than more focus on positive, which is in alignment with the human condition. We're wired to focus on problems. We need to focus on problems evolutionary to survive and avoid danger and not end up dead. So it's very natural for us to think negative things about ourselves. And that's part of the human condition. So it's finding that balance. And as a parent, as you know, it's ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to completely let go and let them think anything that they do is okay. At the same time, you want to be there for them and support them and set those standards. And, no one's at Juilliard whose parents, work, pretty strict in driving them. So that's, a reality that I've struggled with and toyed with. But what was your question again?
Well, I don't even remember. But that's what I like about this. But I do remember. I'll get back to it in a second. On the parenting note, though, it's interesting because I do have a very strong opinion on that. But it doesn't sound very positive, but I think you'll see where I'm going. But it's don't you be the one that knocks the wind out of someone's sails. Let life do it for them. So when somebody comes up to you and says, I want to be a professional athlete. If you know that, okay, this kid's like coming off the bench playing fifth grade soccer, but then they want to be a professional athlete, it's easy for us to say, hey, champ, that's probably not going to work out. But now what do they get to do now the rest of their lives? These moments where it's like they get to resent the fact that their parent didn't support them. So what does it hurt someone to say, man, that sounds like an amazing dream. Now at that point, then kid maybe forgets in a couple of weeks. But when you say, hey, that's not really possible. Not with your genetics, not with, your opportunities, not the way you're playing right now. And I think that oftentimes a parent just says, okay, I need to break it to him now, but that's a parent issue. I need to alleviate my own discomfort right now. So let me tell you, let me let you down easy. Someday you'll thank me for this. No,
well, it's definitely a parent. Yeah, it's definitely a parent issue because Muggsy Bogues, the basketball player who's barely 5'3", I'm sure he was told that number of times. So the truth is, you never know. But back to that curious word, depending upon their age, that's a wonderful goal. It is so important to strive to be the best in whatever it is you put your mind to it. What does it take to get there? We got the internet now. Would you like to, let's do some research together. What do we have to do? Okay, well, we got to get to that travel team. What's it going to take to get to that travel team? Are you working on your skills every day after school? Can I help you? And then there's a way to empower the child to ultimately make that decision for themselves and say,
That's
what?
Yeah.
I just picked up the trumpet and I love it. I don't know if I want to be a professional soccer player anymore.
Yeah. Now it's like, all right, here we go. Which I think that's that one's an easy one. There's a phrase that I will hear parents say often where they say, but I need to make sure that my kid doesn't end up on my couch when they're 25. And I combat that. And I say, no, they need to know they can end up on your couch at 25 because it's quite the opposite of what we think. If your goal is to get them to make sure that isn't going to happen so that you don't have to deal with that, then you're creating a dynamic where then they know that they can't. I mean, it's not safe to even bring that up. Yeah. So now, they're going to not even be very authentic with you, telling you everything's great. Oh no, work's going great, saving a lot of money, and inside it's like work stinks and you guys never taught me how to do a budget. So, but they can't have the courage to say that. So it's just really interesting. But okay. The thing that I asked you about though, is when we started about talking about perfectionism, and then there's because I know that that's the one that when a kid was told that they were bad, worthless, broken by a parent, no less young, that they exile that emotion of shame of that I am not enough. And then that perfectionism comes in there, and that's the protector, right? Yeah. And this is the part where I don't know enough about IFS, but talk about what does that look like? How do you get into that exiled emotion to help them heal? What is that?
So the Protector-Exile Relationship is an important one in IFS. So say, for example, that I, got all good grades and then I get this B and then something else happens. There was a point in time where I felt good about myself. And because of external circumstances, extreme criticism from parents, the part that felt good enough was exiled. That part is exiled in place of a protector that's going to push, that's going to drive and not be secure. And the extreme internal critic. The extreme internal critic is a protector because it's protecting you from being rejected. It wants to make sure you do everything perfect. The perfectionist part is a protector. It's trying to protect you from being rejected, from being abandoned, which all comes from not being good enough. And if you're not good enough, you're not going to get love. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to protect you from that fear of abandonment by making sure you do everything right. And when you don't, I'm going to scream in your head and heart and tell you what a worthless piece of crap you are and remind you so you don't make that mistake again. When you look at the parenting patterns, how many of us were raised, that wasn't our parents' intention, but that was the result.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I do want to give a parent the benefit of the doubt, but I go back to what we were saying earlier, where if they feel like their job is, I need to make sure that my kid knows right from wrong, is going to be successful. But in that moment though, the parent is going through all their own stuff. I don't think we realized that when we were kids, that the parents got all kinds, they're dealing with their mortgage and their relationships and their job. And so it's almost like they're so in their own head that when all of a sudden there is their kid, well, this is my chance. I better say some words of wisdom. I better give them some big epiphany right now, instead of taking that time to really listen to their kid, understand their kid. And I think that can be really difficult. Not trying to make any parent feel bad right now, but I mean, it's the long game. And so often it's what we're doing right then to feel good right now, or to get rid of that discomfort right now. I mean, same thing with turning into some sort of addictive behavior as well. It's about the right now, not being able to sit with that discomfort or admit that they maybe don't know something that they don't know.
Well, the addict is also a protector. The addict is protecting me from pain, protecting me from having to feel the anxiety, the stress, the challenges of life, the crippling low self-esteem. So addict says, I'm going to make that better. I'm going to make it all go away. Screw the consequences. We're not going to worry about those. We're just going to focus on making you feel better. And the actual word, the name for the addict, there's the protectors and exiles, and the addict is a type of protector called a firefighter.
Okay.
And they use the
word about this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because they use the word firefighter because the firefighter has positive intentions.
Mm.
And the firefighter is going to put out that fire of pain. I don't care what happens to the walls, the floors, the flood damage, the chemical spray being sprayed all over. I'm going to kick that door down and I'm going to put out that fire as quickly as possible. And note, the firefighter has good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
The addict has good intentions. And that's a tough thing for some people to get their arms around. But once they appreciate and develop a deep understanding of the needs that the addict is meeting, it's my favorite exercise is some people start addiction programs, Tony, and we do it differently, but they start with how bad it is. Tell me about the cost of your addiction. Tell me how terrible it is. And if this keeps going, what's going to happen? That's important. But by the time people get to us, they're abundantly clear of what that problem is. I like to go the other direction, bit of a curveball. Tell me the positive attributes of that behavior. Tell me the needs that behavior is trying to meet. Oh, well, it is helping me deal with stress and anxiety. Oh, you mean the physiology of fear, regulating a central nervous system? It makes me feel better when I'm down. Oh, regulating your poor self-esteem, giving you something to look forward to. It's giving you autonomy, freedom. It's mine. It's a really, really powerful exercise because it sets up the parts work where later on we get to say, why? Where did that come from? How was that behavior trained in you? And of course, it goes back to childhood in so many cases, of course.
Well, Craig, I don't know if you see, Tiffany's napping says, WT actual F, you say this to palliative patients. And I know that the concept about a palliative patient, somebody that's diagnosed with an illness that can't be cured. And I think this maybe is where you can speak to the concept around the medical model versus the strength-based approach, which is something that, there's a lot of us now doing the strength-based approach, but that's something that you've been involved in for 10, 15 years now. And that medical model is saying we have to treat this like it is something you will never get rid of. And I can tell you, as somebody that's worked with, I think 1,600 addicts now over 15 years, that, I have not seen that be something that has been ultimately helpful in the long run versus that acceptance of that you are a human going through life for this very first time, understanding that these are ways that you are coping. I often look at coping from not feeling connected in a relationship as a parent, in your career, your health, your faith, and then starting to accept the fact that, okay, I don't know what I don't know. And I have embraced these unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so, it's a different approach to look at that. I should let you speak to that though.
Well, I'm looking at Tiffany Z and napping. It's a WT actual S. You say this to palliative patients. So I don't understand the context of that question, Tony, and I don't work with palliative patients.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. I'm thinking this is, and I could be wrong too, but I think that this is when somebody is saying, okay, they are treating this as if this is something that you will never get rid of. You'll addict for life. And so therefore that is this illness. And so now you're trying to tell them that, okay, look at what this addiction actually does for it. What does the addict do? What need does it serve? I mean, and I'm guessing as well, because I haven't really, taken that medical model approach. Is one that I did a long time ago, but it wasn't as productive as what I've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, I think it's an opportunity to highlight that different strokes work for different strokes.
Sure. Yeah.
So there are a number of studies that highlight the long-term identification with the phrase, hi, my name is Craig, I am an addict. And that, for them, is a very powerful reminder of where they are. Hopefully that person has internalized that phrase as a phoenix from the ashes and as a celebration of their growth and recovery. There are also well-documented, well-studied, clinical grade, university grade type studies that highlight that for some people, the anchoring to that identity of being an addict actually causes them harm and makes their symptoms worse. So it's really important for people to find what works for them. Some people need that lifelong declaration, and there's genetic. We now know there's genetic predispositions to some of these addictions, but there's a lot of people who don't need that declaration. And certainly when you look at some of the behavioral addictions, I work with men struggling with I don't know how to say the word, guys. You have to fill in the blanks. We got rules here on TikTok. Behavior. And for a lot of those guys, they don't want that to be their legacy, that I am this forever. Certainly when the goal is to become healthy in that regard, to become a person of integrity, become a person who channels that powerful force inside them towards their partner in a healthy, constructive way. So that label would actually cause the person harm. And as you know,
yes,
Tony, the people who come into the mindful habit system, 70% of them come from other treatment models where they have diseasified their addiction. Yeah. Many of them men of faith who have demonized their addiction, and they need something else. That doesn't make that bad, doesn't make us better. It makes us different.
Well, and I have this phrase I love. It's the strongest force in the human personality is to act in alignment with how you see yourself. So however you identify yourself, you'll find your way back to that home base. So if somebody is, and again, I'm with you. If somebody says that, but I do better when I have to remind myself that I am an addict, then I am not going to try to change their mind with that. But I find that most people I work with really struggle with that. I guess I know I'm an addict. So then they might put together a string of very healthy behaviors, non-acting out behaviors. But that home base that they're saying is like, but I know I'm an addict. So at some point, I don't know when this is going to fall apart. And that brings with it that anxiety of where, okay, but when at some point this is going to end. And so instead of just being in the present moment and celebrating who they are on that road to becoming. So if you are seeing yourself as I am someone who thrives, I'm curious, if they are a faith person, I'm a child of God, whatever that is, then I might actually have a setback from time to time. But my home base is that good person, or that person who is thriving or continuing to grow, or this person, son of God with God-given talents and abilities. Instead of, I'm going to find my way back to that home base of being an addict. So yeah.
Well, it's James Clear in the book Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend to everybody listening right now. That should be in everybody's bookshelf. It is the best book on habits that's out there today. He talks about the 3 levels of change. And as you're reading that chapter, think about, traditional addiction treatment, because you can tell he actually goes out of his way not to mention it, but he talks about there were 3 levels of change. First level of change is outcome change. Outcome change, I've changed the outcome of my behavior. An example of that is I am sober. That's it. I've just stopped doing the bad thing. That's all I've done. Okay. That's level 1. That's not going to last very long. Level 2 is process change. Here are the things that I am doing to not do this behavior anymore. That's process change. That's level 2. We're getting close, but we're not all the way there.
Mm-hmm.
The third level of change is identity change. I don't do that anymore. I prioritize my exual health. I prioritize my commitment to my partner. I'm a man of integrity. I don't lie. I don't do that anymore. That's identity change. And for some people, they're able to create that identity change by anchoring themselves to the identity of being an addict for life. And that works for them. Yay, wonderful. There are others who that term is an anchor that weighs them down and anchors them to that identity, which they're told they can't break free from, and actually creates worse outcomes. This isn't me. This is science. You can, people listening can Google this, and there are a segment of people who don't connect with that approach. And now they get to find what's going to work for them.
Yeah. So that's, I think maybe that's what they were talking about with that. Andrea, I'm addicted with my phone. I need to stop because I have a toddler. Man, the phone addiction, I just want to talk a little bit about, and I think this is most any addiction. Craig, I don't know, your thoughts on the concept of a trauma bond, where the thing that provides you with the reward also delivers the punishment. So then when you then feel down, you turn to that thing that hoping it will give you punishment or hoping it'll give you the reward. But now it's, constantly just checking and hoping that this is going to be the dopamine dump, and actually starts to, I think James Clear in Atomic Habits also talks about the dopamine dump comes in the anticipation of, so am I going to get the validation from my phone? Am I going to get the reward? But then so often, whatever the notification is, or I don't want to talk to this person, or it's more emails, or it's texts I don't want to get back to. Now I feel worse. So now what can I do though? I can't use my phone to turn to a game or go to some site or something like that. So that trauma bond is real.
It is a ridiculously effective coping strategy. And the short form, like this app here, and probably people listening know that doom scrolling, it's so nefarious because it leaves, I'll just speak to myself, and if anyone connects with this, let me know in the chat. I've got my algorithm dialed in. I'm getting the virtual couch. I'm getting Diary of a CEO. I'm getting Gabor Mate. It fools you into thinking you've accomplished something. Or at a minimum, you're entertained, right? Oh, what a wonderful thing. I'm entertained. But eventually, it's got this grip on our brains, and we know what it's doing to children. There's a recommendation now that just came out from a leading child organization that said no electronic for children under 11, no cell phone for children under 11. And they're pulling them out of schools. And you know what the kids are reporting? The teachers anticipated anger and frustration. You know who got pissed off? The parents. You know who breathed a sigh of relief? The kids. It's so damaging. The way it impacts our attention span, the way it impacts productivity, the way it is like an anti-mindful machine that can pretend or makes you think that you're being mindful and engaged and enjoying the content, and you certainly are. But it's like high fructose corn syrup. Even if you're listening to the best stuff, what did you do about it? Did you take notes? So one of the questions I like to ask people is, okay, so you heard all this great advice. What action did it lead to?
Yeah.
What specific action did the great advice that you received on the wonderful live with the virtual couch and Craig from the Mindful Habit System, what action did you take? And so often, it was certainly my case, and I put tack back on so I could do things like this, but I've got to get it off my home screen. I've got to be really deliberate in when I use it. And in fact, it's a trigger for me. It's like a needs indicator, like, wait a minute, something's off right now. I'm spending too much time on this app. I'm watching too many of these short clips of TV shows and movies that I'm never going to watch, that I'm interested about, that I don't care about, but I do care about. And it's a sign that I'm dysregulated when that, screen time ticks up.
It's interesting you say that because the therapist I used to work with a lot more teenagers, and they would get phones taken away. I mean, we'd go on a whole other tangent about the uncertainty of when they would get it taken away. Like that's another thing, a parent not holding a strong boundary. So the kid at some point, it's like, I don't even know why I got it taken away. I don't know how long it'll be taken away. But then they did, I would be surprised how often they would then at some point be okay that they didn't have their phone anymore. Because I always thought, man, this is not going to go well, And so when you said the parents are the ones that were the most angry, I mean, I think that's because now all of a sudden the parent has to get off of their device to now interact with the kid. Now they got to be curious, that can be a lot of work. So that's a really fascinating dynamic. But boy, trying to get the phone away from some kids when that's all that they've had. And this is where I'm going to sound like an old man telling everybody to get off my lawn. But it is interesting though, when people have grown up with it since they've been young, and it is just a part of what they do and it's a part of their human experience. I mean, that's where I do think it's some tough road ahead to be able to implement things like that. No electronics under 11 or things like that. So that one will be interesting.
That one is going to be ridiculously hard. Parents, we need support from the schools. We need good policies. We need good education from the companies themselves. But we know, as a matter of fact, because these documents have come out in litigation, these companies will never, ever, ever do the right thing by their teenage users. They haven't done it yet. They're not going to do it now. What I try to do is lead by example. I love going to a doctor's office, for example, and I leave my phone in the car and I sit there. And it's uncomfortable. And it feels a little awkward, but that's how I practice mindfulness. So that's one of the things that I do is to leave that phone behind and not be the person in the waiting room, for example, or wherever I am, to leave it. And I got my watch. If someone needs to reach me, my kids can text me, they can call me, but I put it down, and doing so has brought me great value. I still get sucked in sometimes. I'm not, certainly not preaching to anybody. I'm sharing my own struggles with it. However, if you're listening and you feel like you're addicted to your phone, not now, tap the screen and do whatever you're supposed to do to get this up so everybody can see it, or, whatever I'm supposed to tell you to do. But take a break. Take little breaks and notice the discomfort. And then you realize your phone has become a crutch. Mm-hmm. Is it helping you or is it hurting you? And if you can ask yourself that question with one, there's no in between. You have to pick. It's helping you. God bless, brother and sister. Rock on. Like, you did it. Congratulations. Now look in the mirror and make sure you're not blowing smoke. Right. So often than not, it's hurting.
Now, I love what Nonchalant King says here. It's wild how just 20 years ago, we didn't get as anxious not knowing where loved ones are so often. And that's a deep concept there. That's part of the, that concept of implicit memory, or what it feels like to be us, you, me, Nonchalant King. It's based off the slow residue of your lived experience. So that has been something that's been building over time of just being aware. Where are these people? When are they coming back? When are they going to be home? So I think about that stuff often as well, because it's hard to remember what that was like. It's hard to think about your kids would go somewhere and you don't think about where are they right now? Did they already make it there? I'm just going to text them really quick. I do think that becomes a way to alleviate one's own discomfort or anxiety. And then, right. So that one's wild. And I don't know what we do about that, because we can't just tell somebody, well, don't worry about it. That doesn't work. Everybody listening.
It's so nice. Yeah. Don't you feel good knowing, where your daughter is and she's not home, she's running late? I just open up Life 360, for example, and I know where everybody is. Like anything, you can get obsessive. Any tool can be, you can use a hammer to put in a nail, and you can use a hammer to whack yourself in the head. One way works for you, the other way doesn't. So it's hard to find balance, but I think that's an important word, since most people aren't getting rid of their devices. Although sales of flip phones are exploding. And we have more and more clients who are saying, you know what? I'm done. If I have to leave someone a long text message, I'm going to call them and leave a voicemail message. There's shortcomings to that. There's ways around those shortcomings. Buy the GPS, turn it on in your car, whatever you need to do. You know, you have to get a laptop to look up the Yelp reviews and find that restaurant in that new town that you're in. There's certainly challenges, but I don't know a single person who has gone to a flip phone or what are called a dumb phone and has not reported miraculous results.
I hear that as well, yet I am not ready to do it. I mean, but I do.
No way.
Barbie mentioned or said earlier, I think there's a difference between addiction and compulsion. And I just mentioned in there, okay, compulsion versus impulse as well. And so Craig, kind of cue up what you have to say about that. But I do find there's a big difference. It's helpful to understand the difference between a compulsion and an impulse. So that compulsion is where somebody's continually thinking about it. Always. They're thinking about when are they going to be able to do whatever the behavior is again. And so they're structuring their day around it. As soon as somebody leaves the room, now they can do it. And so I think a lot of times the therapist and me using the mindful habit system, using my path back recovery course, that I'm helping people overcome that compulsion first and foremost. They're able to really get a handle on the compulsion. But then the impulse is one of those things that can happen at times. And I remember on a podcast talking about, I'm trying to eat better at one point, and I go on some long run on a Saturday, and my compulsive nature, I've got that down. I'm not going out to eat all the time. I'm not eating garbage. I'm trying to put good fuel in my body. But after a particular long run, I don't get ready early enough. I'm going out with my son. He's got a basketball tournament. We would go at a convenience store, and I just impulsively just get the little thing of chocolate donuts and I just inhale them, and so that's where I do think sometimes knowing the difference. So, cause then we're going to want to beat ourselves up, and I feel prey to this impulse. And then I feel like, oh my gosh, it's all over. So now I might as well go on the bender, which that's not a helpful thing either. Versus also what I like looking at that is, okay, now I know that every time I go on a 15-mile run on a Saturday morning and don't get time for breakfast before then I'm going to go and we're going to stop and get a Gatorade for my son before basketball. I got to watch out for those donuts. So, I mean, it's all data. And that's where I think earlier when we were talking about, there's nothing wrong with you. You're human. You're going through life for the very first time. And that happened. But we have a tendency to want to just beat ourselves up. Like, oh my gosh, I blew it. What's wrong with me? And go back to this like cave of shame because we think that for some reason, beating myself up this time, that'll make a difference. Then I'll get it versus just check that out. Acceptance that happened. I'm good. Go back to this home base of that. I'm a good person. I'm working on this. I'm doing my best. And then that just becomes a little blip. That's just a little setback. It's not. And there we go. See, I knew I couldn't do it. So what do you have? Do you have anything to say around that compulsion versus addiction?
Well, I think for me, it exists on a spectrum, but specifically regarding the impulse, those impulses are biologically hardwired, and the chances of you completely eliminating them is virtually nil. Maybe there are some people out there in the spectrum of human behavior who, never have that impulse again, but that's certainly not my experience. And I know it's not yours. One of the things I like to say about impulses, another word we could use is triggers. The triggers are biologically hardwired. That impulse is a needs indicator. It's telling you need something. You have to eat this right now. Your body needs that sugar rush. Your body needs that charge. And if you develop the skills, it's what I like to call in the moment mindfulness, not the, sitting mindfulness or, being present mindfulness. Well, part of being present, but it's using your awareness of that trigger in the automatic thoughts that you have, in the feeling in your body, to drive, or in the part that's awakened to drive positive action, to help you make a good choice instead of or treating yourself to the donuts. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And maybe making a healthier choice 8 out of 10 times, and 2 times enjoy. And when you do it, when you enjoy those donuts, let them be the most magnificent donuts you've ever tasted in your life, and eat them slowly and notice how your body changes. But if you come to see, people are afraid of their triggers. They hate their triggers. They try to get rid of their triggers. But really what's happening is that's your body's way of telling you that you need something. Something's off. You're hungry. You haven't eaten after a long race.
Right.
And so I'm going to go for that quick fix, that insulin high fructose sugar rush that comes with eating it. And there you are.
Okay. Hey, we got another 10 minutes. So if anybody has questions here, get them in right now for Coach Craig, myself. Coach Craig's an addiction specialist. And we didn't really talk a lot about your background tonight. Well, we did a little bit about your background, your story, but what you're doing now, maybe talk about your mindful habit system. I take one of those group coaching calls every week. It's phenomenal. And, but I don't talk about what you offer.
Yeah, no, Tony, I love working together. Guys who enter our program get to work with you, get to work with me. So I primarily work with men struggling with compulsive exual behavior. That can be corn, that can be camming, that can be a host of other nefarious behaviors. Usually people come to us when they're in crisis. They've just gotten caught. They've just hit a new low where they realize that this behavior isn't serving them anymore and they can't stop. And so we've been doing this for 12 years. We continue to grow. We're getting ready to plan our next in-person retreat, which I haven't announced the place yet, but I'm going to tell you where it's going to be, and we're going to have a nice ride there, and it's going to be awesome because Tony and I are going to be working together on that retreat. But it's been a great privilege, and now we're branching out. Our next big project is my vision is to bring people who might need something different or a supplement to traditional therapy or traditional 12 steps. People are different and they need different things. So I want to build a community around the root of the problem, the low self-esteem, the poor coping strategies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, versus the behavior itself. And that's the next big project that we're launching in the next couple of months. So I'm excited about that.
Well, and so I love talking about this too. As a licensed marriage and family therapist for almost 20 years now, I really enjoy working with somebody like Craig, especially Craig as a coach, because you were saying earlier, you try to stay in your lane. You've got a lot of knowledge though. And I know that the therapist in me, I really am walking this path. I'm right beside the client. Hey, where do you want to go? Tell me what's going on for you. But then often they're saying, well, tell me what I need to do next. And that's where there's a little bit of that from a therapist standpoint, but really you want to eventually have that person. It's a them thing. They need to take ownership of their own life and their own actions. And there are some therapists, a lot of therapists they're still doing it to kind of work through their own stuff. So they're saying, well, here's what I would do if I were you. Well, you're not them. So a good therapist is able to sit with their own discomfort and then say, okay, I've got my thoughts and opinions, but then I want to help this person with where they're at because they have all the stuff that they bring into that situation. But at some point though, as somebody really start to start to gain some skills, I often say that you get a good coach like Craig. And now you are saying, okay, here's a path. Here's a path that I really feel like can help because I've trodden that path. I've helped a lot of people with that path. And I will agree that I think that path can help too, but I want to be that person that's right there with them. So just in case that path, they're not able to follow through on that path or it brings up different things for them. So I think a mix of a therapist and a coach is a really nice combo. I think it's
well,
yeah.
And having the path that we have, it is a very structured, psychoeducation program on self-control, emotional intelligence, creating a healthy identity, restoring trust in your relationship, and building sustainability, for example, I also think there are too many coaches and too many therapists, and we see this all the time, telling people what to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's dangerous. And certainly for the therapist, it's unethical and possibly a violation of their professional standards.
Yeah.
Now, while a coach has more leeway, and I'm certainly, always expressing my opinion, it's still helping them understand, okay, here's what I want to accomplish. I want to learn self-control. Here's my path. And then they get to decide if it's valuable to them, if it's bringing them value and delivering on that promise. Because one of the most important things, Tony, and we've talked about this a lot, that I've learned over the years, different people respond to different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that has really helped me. So in our program, we have a 30-day money return policy. We initiate refunds. If someone's doing a terrible job and they're not getting value, let's say, for example, they sign up for the program and they don't connect with me. You and I both know that the single greatest predictor of results in a therapeutic or coaching environment is the therapeutic alliance, or in a broader context, the working alliance. That means their relationship with me. So if someone in my program isn't connecting with me, not connecting with you, then it's not a fit. Doesn't make us bad, but it means that we don't have what they need, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I always want to tell that person, hey, at least you are now engaging with help. So now let's find you the help that you'll feel more of a connection with. I don't take offense to that, because if somebody comes in and they really are just trying to but everything you're saying, that's one of those where are they in a position where they're looking to change, or are they just hoping that they can prove to you that your methods won't work on them? So that then what? So then they can go back and then act out again. And I do see that from time to time.
In those people, we want to get them to the right resource, because they're not getting value. People pay to join our program. And if they're not getting value, they should take that money and direct it to some place that works. That's how it should be.
Yeah. Okay. Any parting thoughts, Craig? Take us home.
A parting thought. Someone asked earlier if we were dating, and the answer is no. The answer is no. Tony's a handsome man, but we're both happily married. Me for, I think we're going on 27 years. And how many years for you, Tony?
34.
34. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm only 40 years old. So thank you, Nonchalant King. There we go.
Well, my parting thoughts are: you have no bad parts. You do not have bad habits. Understand the needs that these bad habits are meeting, and that'll change the way you talk to yourselves. It'll help you meet those needs proactively, and you're going to break those bad habits quicker. So,
okay. Craig, we're going to be doing this. We're talking about every Tuesday is what we're thinking about doing. 1:00 Pacific, right? Is that?
I would count me in, brother.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah. So we'll start getting, if you have questions, you can queue them up. You can send them to contact@tonyoverbay.com, or Craig. I'm not sure where's a good place somebody can find you.
Support at themindfulhabit.com, themindful1lhabit.com. And I'd love to answer your questions on Tuesday.
Okay. Sounds good. Coach Craig, thanks for joining me.
All right. Peace out. Good luck, everybody.
Right.
Bye.
For pillars, emotional maturity, and for pillars, 1 and 3. You're not broken, you're a human, so check that out. You don't know what you don't know is what it's all about.